back for another fun project, and today we're working on that wheat stitch again. It's such a gorgeous stitch, and we're going to be making these crochet slipper socks. For this fun project to make a pair, you will need the Color Theory yarn. Now you can use a substitute. I do have a blog link on how to choose a proper substitute, but the main thing is to get gauge on anything that is fitted. You will also want to have a 4mm crochet hook, some scissors to cut those ends, a yarn needle to weave them in, and a stitch marker is never a bad idea when you're working any project. These are really simple. They're made flat and then will join, and the toe and the heel are worked in the round. And this stitch repeat is so rewarding. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Now to get started for this size of slipper sock that I'm making on camera, we are going to create a slip knot and place that onto our hook and then chain 71. Now you might be chaining a different amount of chains depending on what size you are making. Now after chaining your starting chains, we are going to tighten down that last chain because it's a turning chain. And I like to work in the back humps of the chain, but we will be single crocheting in the second chain from the hook and in each stitch across. Now, if you need to, go ahead and throw a stitch marker into that first stitch so that you can mark the beginning of your row, which makes it a little bit easier to keep track of the stitches. So we're simply going to single crochet across all the chains, starting in the second chain from the hook. And for the size I'm making on camera, that will mean that we will be working 70 stitches across. Now after single crocheting across, we're going to turn our work. Chain one is a turning chain. That does not count as a stitch. And then we're going to be working in the back loops only for this row. And normally we would insert through both loops, but we're not going to insert through this front loop, only the back loop, and that's going to give us a nice ribbing texture for this row. So we're going to start by single crocheting in the back loop only and mark that stitch if you need to, and then single crochet in every single stitch across in the back loop only. The stitch count will remain the same. Now after completing the single crochet stitches for row 2, we're going to turn our work, and this is where we're going to start those unique puff stitches that make that wheat look. For the first 5 stitches of the row, however, we're going to keep those in the single crochet in the back loop only because that's going to be the top of the sock and that will be the ribbing that helps hold it up. If you want in the first stitch of the row, you can work through both loops, just make it a bit cleaner, but you don't have to. You can also work that in the back loop only. And I'm going to work in the back loop only for the first 5 stitches of this row. And after working the 5 stitches in the back loop only, we're going to start our puff stitches. These are worked by skipping the next stitch and single crocheting in the next. So we're going to skip and single crochet into the next stitch. And now we're going to go back to that skipped stitch and we're going to work a modified puff. So we're going to yarn over, go into that skipped stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop. And you want to pull these loops as high as the first loop on your hook. Then we're going to yarn over again, insert into the same skipped space, yarn over and pull up a loop. We now have 5 loops on our hook. We're going to yarn over and pull through 4 of those loops and then yarn over and pull through the last 2 to complete that stitch. And that's our repeat across until the very last stitch of this row. So let's do that again. We'll skip 1 and single crochet into the next. Going back to that skip stitch, yarn over and insert, yarn over and pull up a loop. Do that again. Yarn over and pull through the first 4 loops on the hook, yarn over and pull through the remaining 2. And that's what we'll be working all the way across until we get to the very last stitch of the row, which will be a single crochet. These can be until you get used to them, you might have to work them a little bit slower, but you will get used to this stitch to where you can work it at a decent speed. And we're going to do that all the way across. Now that we have come to the last stitch of the row, we're simply going to single crochet into that last stitch and then turn our work. And now we're going to do another row of this puff stitch. We're going to be working it in a similar way, but we'll want to make sure as we get to the end of this row, our last 5 stitches are worked in the back loop only. So we're going to start by chaining 1 and then single crochet into the very first stitch and then skip the next stitch and single crochet into the next. Then we're going to go back and work that puff stitch and keep doing that repeat. Skip a stitch and single crochet, Going back to that skipped stitch, do a puff stitch. So it's similar to the previous row. We're just making sure that we're starting and stopping the row with the right amount of single crochet stitches so that we have the bottom part where we're going to be working the toe, and then the top part will be our cuff. So continue to repeat those stitches, those puff stitches, all the way across for this row until you get to the last 5 stitches of this row. And now that we've come to the last 5 stitches of the row, we are going to single crochet into the back loop only of each of those 5 stitches. Now, if you want the very top stitch of the cuff, you can work through both of the loops to kind of make the top a little bit straighter, but not a big difference. So now we're going to turn our work again and chain 1. And for the next 2 rows, we are going to be repeating a bit. We're going to be single crocheting in the back loop only for every single stitch across. So that is for the next 2 rows. And then the 2 rows after that, we will be repeating these puff stitches. So this is a 4-row repeat, and this is going to be quite a bit of the body of the sock. Now what I've done next is I have repeated that 4-row repeat for a total of 5 times. At this point, this is half of my foot. So when we hold this up to our foot and we wrap it around, this will be about half of my foot. And we're just looking at the foot portion when we're looking at what we need to adjust here. Now you may need to add another repeat. We want it about halfway around our foot. We do want some negative ease, so if it's not quite halfway, but close, that is perfect. We will be able to do a little bit of adjusting in the next sections to adjust for our foot and our leg in terms of the width. But for right now, before we move on with the body of this, you'll want to do as many repeats as needed to get about halfway around your foot. For the size I'm showing, this is the size 9. This is looking at these measurements. You might need more if you have a wider foot, or less if you have a narrower foot, but a lot of the adjustments will come in the next section. You just want to make sure that this is close to half of the circumference of your foot portion, not the top of your leg, your foot portion. Now next we are going to be working the top of the leg section. We're only going to be working 48 stitches for this next row and then stopping and turning. We'll leave the rest of the stitches unworked and come back to those later for the foot. So we are working from everything from the heel up on our leg. So I'm going to turn my work, and I've chained 1, and we are going to single crochet in the back loop only for 48 stitches. The height of this slipper sock is the same for every single size. It will be 48 stitches for every single size. The difference in stitches comes in the length of the foot portion when we're going to talk about sizing. So we're going to single crochet in the back loop only for 48 stitches for this row. Now that we've worked the first 48 single crochets in the back loop only, we are going to turn our work for this leg section and chain 1. The remaining stitches will stay unworked for now, and we are going to do row 2 of our pattern repeat, which is single crocheting in the back loop only across. So we're going to be making a little bit of a flap here, and this will be from the heel portion up around the back of our leg. Now the nice thing about this section is this is where we can adjust for the width or the circumference of the sock. So this leg section, this panel will be done separately from the foot. So this can have more repeats and be a bit wider. For this sock that I am creating, I did 5 additional repeats on this section. So this leg section that will be out here, I did 5 additional repeats. So I just did as many as I did here, but you may want to do more or less. You're going to keep holding it up to your leg and wrapping it around. You will want some negative ease, which means we want it tight enough that it's going to stay on our foot. And you can see what works best for you in terms of adjusting the repeats. So I'm going to continue working these 48 stitches in pattern, always doing those 5 single crochets at the top, even when we're doing the puff stitch rows. And I'm going to work this for a total of 5 repeats for this leg section. Now I just want to know, as you're working this leg section, that is the same style of repeat as we did previously, where when you're working that puff stitch row, when the first row, you'll start by single crocheting 5 and then doing that puff stitch, repeat, and then in the very last stitch of the row there will be one stitch left and you will single crochet into that stitch. And then we're going to turn our work and single crochet into that very first stitch after chaining one. And then we'll do that puff stitch repeat until the very last 5 stitches, where we will single crochet in the back loop only for those last 5 stitches. So it's the same repeat that we did before, just working it in with less stitches for this section. All right, so now that we have done this portion of this pattern, so this leg section, we are going to be joining some edges. But before we do, once again, put this around your leg and see how it fits. It will absolutely have a negative ease. So unless it is stretched, you don't want it to come together. You want it to be about 1 inch short. And then when it is pulled together, it will have a negative ease around your leg so that it stays in place and doesn't always fall down. Now, after doing this section, we have not fastened off yet because we are actually going to be joining our last edge with our first edge here and putting it into a tube now, because there's no need to come back later and attach yarn again. We can finish this step now. So what we will do is we will have the right side facing us, and then we're going to fold this over, and now the wrong side is facing us. So the right side is on the inside. And now we're going to take our yarn here, and I've chained one, and we're going to be crocheting these edges together. So we're going to go through the very first stitch, and I am going through both loops on this, and then into the first stitch of the first row that we did. So these are actually our chain stitches that we had done before. And then we're going to yarn over, pull through all of those, and the loop on the hook to slip stitch. So you go through the stitch closest to you, the stitch farthest away, just matching them up, yarn over, pull through all the loops on the hook to slip stitch those together. We will be doing this all the way down for all of the stitches. So this will end up being 48 stitches down the side of this. We're only going to be working until the end of this fabric here for the top part of our leg. Now, after working down all those stitches, we can go ahead and fasten this off, and you can weave that end in if you would like. But at this point, the wrong side is facing us, and we are going to need to work over here. So I think it's easier at this point to flip it back and to get the right side facing. So we're just going to flip that fabric around, and that way that leg fabric is right where it should be. You can even try this on again and see how it fits, maybe even before you fasten off if you want. And then we are ready to work the foot part of this, and we're going to be working those stitches on this side. Now I'm going to go ahead and place a slip knot onto my hook. You can always join with a slip stitch, but I'm just going to place a slip knot onto my hook. That way I'm set up and I can go into this next stitch with a single crochet. And now we are going to single crochet into the back loop only all the way across. Now we're going to turn our work, and for row 2, we're simply going to chain 1, and working in the back loop only, we're going to single crochet into each stitch across those stitches. And your stitch count might be different here depending on what size that you are working. For this size that I'm working, I have 22 stitches here. Now after working row 2, we will turn our work, chain 1, and single crochet in the first stitch, and then we will start our repeat. That will be to skip 1, single crochet, and go back and do a puff stitch into the repeat. And then when we get to the end of this row, we will have 1 stitch left over, and we will single crochet in it. I'm starting and stopping these rows in the single crochet stitch because it makes it much easier when we need to come back and work the toe and the heel along those edges, to work them along single crochet stitches versus along the edge of a rough puff stitch. So we will continue our repeat until the last stitch, and then single crochet into the last stitch of this row. And now that we are the last stitch, I'll single crochet, turn my work, and repeat that for this next row where we will single crochet into that first stitch, chain 1 and single crochet in the first stitch, skip 1, work the puff stitch, skip 1, work a single crochet, go back and work the puff stitch, getting ahead of myself there. And we'll work that puff stitch repeat all the way until the last stitch, just like we did on the previous row, and single crochet into that last stitch. But now let's talk the amount of repeats. This once again can be adjustable. So I'm going to be doing 4 sets of those repeats for a total of 16 rows for this section. The reason why I'm not doing 20 like I did before on the top is my foot, and I'm assuming your foot, is not as wide as our leg. So we don't need to do as many repeats here, but you will want to check it the same way we did around our leg to see if you need to add or remove any repeat section to make it fit just right. So I'm going to continue until I have 4 total repeats, 16 rows for this section. Now that we have those repeats done, you can always wrap it around your foot and hold it to see if it's just right, or even do the seam and check it before moving on to the toe. But what we're going to do is a seam the same way we did on this side, but I do like to do it with the wrong side facing out. So I'm simply going to flip it so the wrong side is facing out, turn my work here, and we are going to slip stitch this the same way that we did when we did the top part. So we'll start by chaining 1, and then we're going to join up our sides, and we're going to be working into the very next stitch after the last one worked. So you just want to make sure that you're working into the correct stitch, and we'll go into the stitch of the fabric closest to us, and then into the first stitch on the first edge of this section, and then we will yarn over and slip stitch. And now we're going to do that for every single stitch all the way down. So we're simply slip stitching these stitches together. And now that we have slip stitched all the way down, we need to flip this so that the right side is out. Now this one's a bit trickier because you can either flip all this fabric through this opening, or you can grab your yarn and you're also going to follow your strand and flip it through here. So I'm going to flip this to the right side facing out, but now I need my yarn to be down here. So I'm simply going to reach through my sock, grab my yarn, probably easier with the label off, and I'm going to pull that all the way through. And that way we have the yarn where it needs to be and the strand where it needs to be. And now we have the body portions of our sock done. The next steps are to do the toe, and then we'll come back lastly to do the heel. Our yarn is still attached here at the toe, so we don't need to fasten off for us to keep on going. Our next steps for the toe is to slip stitch 1 slip stitch per row around the bottom edge here. That is going to give us 36 slip stitches, but I just want to know if you have changed the width of this, that's going to change the stitch count. Still just work 1 slip stitch per row all the way around. I'm going to start by chaining 1, especially because we were working on the other side of this before, so that helps bring it to this side. And now I'm simply going to slip stitch along the first row of this, and then grab a stitch marker and mark that very first stitch. And then I'll slip stitch on the edge of the next row and the next. So we're simply doing 1 slip stitch per row edge all the way around. Now, as I'm slip stitching this, I just want to note that these are not tight. You do not want to change the fabric here. So if you're moving this and it's not flexible, your slip stitches are too tight. You don't want these too tight. You want them to be loose enough that we still have some flexibility in the end of this sock. Now that I have slip stitched 36 stitches around, so 1 stitch per edge row, I'm going to move my stitch marker and we're going to work continuously right into this next round. So working in the back loops only, we are going to single crochet 1 into that very first stitch and then place our stitch marker. So for round 1, we are simply single crocheting in the back loop only all the way around. So only in that back loop. It leaves a nice edge. You don't, I mean, if you want to work through both loops, you absolutely can. It doesn't change the look of it a ton. I just love leaving these strands here for a nice transition. But as personal preference, it won't change it much if you want to work through both loops. So I'll work 36 single crochet stitches around. And once again, if you have more or less stitches than me, that is okay. Now, after working all the way around, I'm ready to start round 2. And we are going to start this round with a single crochet 2 together. I just want to show you a type of decrease that is a little bit invisible. So we have our next 2 stitches, and we could do a traditional single crochet 2 together, or we can insert our hook into the first loop of the first stitch, loop back towards the front, and go into the first loop of the second stitch, and now yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, and pull through 2, and that does what's called an invisible single crochet decrease. It just makes it a little bit less noticeable. And then we are going to single crochet into the next 4 stitches. And now we're ready to decrease again. So this is going to be our repeat here all the way around. We're going to do a single crochet 2 together, and then single crochet into the next 4 stitches. And that's our repeat around. Now, if you have a different stitch count, what we're doing for this round is we are decreasing by 6 stitches. So you can simply just decrease as evenly as possible 6 stitches on this round if you're starting out with a different stitch count. Now at the end of round 2, we have a total of 30 stitches, and now we're ready to go right into round 3. And round 3 starts with a single crochet 2 together. And then you want to place that stitch marker since we are working continuously around. And then we're going to single crochet into the next 3 stitches. And that's going to be our repeat all the way around here. So that will be single crochet 2 together, and then single crochet into the next 3 stitches. And this will decrease our stitch count to 24 stitches for the end of round 3. And now we are ready for round 4. Round 4, we will do a single crochet 2 together, marking that first stitch, and then we will single crochet 2. And that's our repeat around for round 4. So that's single crochet 2 together, and then single crochet 2. And at the end of round 4, we will have 18 stitches. And now for round 5. And for round 5, we'll move our stitch marker and start with a single crochet 2 together, placing that stitch marker back. And now we're going to single crochet 1. Then we'll do a single crochet 2 together and single crochet 1. And we'll work that all the way around. And at the end of round 5, we will have a total of 12 stitches. And now for our final round, we'll move our stitch marker. And for round 6, we are going to single crochet 2 together all the way around. And at the end of round 6, we will have a total of 6 stitches. So we're just single crocheting 2 together all the way around. Now at the end of round 6, we can remove our stitch marker. And then we can go ahead and fasten off that yarn, leaving a long tail in order for us to sew the rest of this closed. So now we will grab our yarn needle, and we have 6 stitches here, and we're going to go through the front loop of each stitch around. So we're just weaving through that front loop of each stitch around. Now once you have done that, you can pull that opening closed, pull it pretty tight to make sure that it's secure, and now we can simply weave in our end, and the toe is complete. Now we're ready to start the heel. I've left my tail end on this side because once we're done, we can use it to close any gaps we may have on each side of this heel. So I'm just going to tuck that in for later. We're going to grab our yarn, and we are going to be attaching to the first stitch on the bottom side of this heel along that edge. So we had these single crochet edges that are completely formed here. So we'd be going along the edge of a puff stitch edge for our very first stitch. So I'm going to chain 1 to attach that, and then slip stitch into the same. And now I'm going to grab a stitch marker, and toss that in there so we know where the first stitch of this round is, because we're going to be working this heel in the round. Next, we're going to slip stitch along the edge row of the next puff stitch row, and then slip stitch along the edge rows of those single crochet rows. So we're just simply slip stitching along the edges. Now, if you've done it like this, we have a different stitch count for the top of the heel and the bottom of the heel, which is okay. The top of the heel, we had more rows than the bottom. So the bottom of the heel, we have 16 rows, and the top we have 20. We're going to slip stitch 1 stitch per row all the way around, and that will bring us to a total of 36 stitches. Now, as I come to the other corner here, I'm about to do my 16th stitch along the edge of the bottom of the heel as a slip stitch, but I just want to show you a trick that if you want to, you can grab some fabric that's on the side here. So we're not creating a stitch, we're not decreasing a stitch. We're just grabbing some of that fabric before doing this slip stitch on the corner, and then we're going to pull through all the loops on the hook. And what that does is it will decrease the holes on the corners, but we've only created 1 stitch. And now I'm going to be working around the other side of the heel, the top side of the heel, working 1 slip stitch per row, and this will be a total of 20 slip stitches. So now we're going to be working 1 stitch all the way around, 1 single crochet stitch in the back loop only. So I'm going to move my stitch marker. We're also working this continuously, and we're going to go in the back loop of the first stitch and do a single crochet and then mark it. And then single crochet into the back loop only of every single stitch around. Now that we have worked round 1, we are ready to start decreasing with round 2. So I'm going to move my stitch marker, and we're going to do a single crochet 2 together. And once again, I like to do it as that invisible decrease. And then we're going to place our stitch marker. Then we are going to single crochet into the next 14 stitches. Now, if you have a different stitch count than what I have here with 36, we're going to talk about that in a minute. Now that I've single crocheted 14, we are going to do a decrease again. So single crochet 2 together. And now we're going to rotate our work, and we are going to repeat that along the top side. So that is a single crochet 2 together, and then single crochet 14, and then we'll single crochet the last 2 stitches in this round together. Now that we are at the last 2 stitches, we will single crochet those together. Now, before I go on to the next round, I want to talk about what you're going to do if you have a different stitch count here because we've adjusted the sizing. What you will do is you will work half the stitches of whatever you have. So let's say you increase the sizing and you had another repeat along the top here or another repeat along the bottom. So you have potentially 4 to 8 more stitches going on. What you'll do is you'll work half of the total stitches. So split whatever number of stitches you have all the way around in half, and you'll take half the stitches and do a decrease, work to the end of those half stitches and do the last 2 as a decrease. So essentially you're just decreasing on each side for each round and working the stitches in between. So your halfway point is you'll do the single crochet 2 together, work the bottom stitches until the last 2 and single crochet 2 together, and then repeat that on these stitches on the top. Now for the stitch count that I'm working, we've just decreased by 4 stitches. So that means that we took it from 36 to 32. And now we're going to do the next round. This will be for round 3. We're going to start with a single crochet 2 together. Place that stitch marker into that first stitch, and then we're going to single crochet 12 and then single crochet 2 together. And then once we've completed that, we're just going to simply repeat that on the top side. So once again for round 3, I've done a single crochet 2 together, single crochet 12, and single crochet 2 together. Now I'm going to rotate my work here, and we're simply going to repeat that on the top side for round 3, and this will decrease the stitch count by 4 again, which means we've brought it down to 28 stitches for round 3. And now we're ready for round 4, and we're going to start round 4 with a single crochet 2 together and mark that stitch, and then we're going to single crochet 10 and single crochet 2 together, and then we'll repeat that onto the top side of this. Now for rounds 5, 6, 7, and 8, I'm going to work off camera here because it's quite simple what we're doing. So we're going to single crochet 2 together, work some stitches and single crochet 2 together as in the written pattern. So for round 5, we're going to single crochet 2 together, then single crochet 8, then single crochet 2 together, and repeat on the other side. For round 6, we would have 6 single crochets in between the decreases. For round 7, we'll have 4, and for round 8, it will be single crochet 2 together, single crochet 2, single crochet 2 together, and repeat on the other side. So I'm going to go ahead and work those off camera, and I'll come back so we can see what that looks like. Now that we've worked those 8 rounds and we have a total of 8 stitches, we are good to fasten off. Now, if you have ended with a different stitch count, that's okay. You'll just want to work until this hole is pretty small, and then you're going to follow these same steps. So I'm going to fasten off the yarn, pull it through. I can go ahead and remove my stitch marker, and then we're going to grab our yarn needle. Now we'll want to do the same thing that we did with the toe, and we are going to loop through the front loop of all the remaining stitches around. And once you've done that, we can go ahead and pull that hole tight, and then we're going to weave in our ends. And now you have a gorgeous pair of cushy, squishy, warm slipper socks. If you are like me, you may not be able to stop at just one. These are so cozy and they look fantastic and they're so warm to wear. I really hope you enjoyed this project. Please be sure to hit that subscribe button and come back for more fun projects soon.